everybody. Welcome to Dattitude. It is episode number 202, and this is the first episode of the new year, 2024. Hard to believe. I mean, look at Larry and I. We don't look any different than if it would have been, 2004, right?
Well, I will say, thanks to Facebook, I was reminded that 6 years ago today, myself and my mother-in-law were on the front of NOLA.com as she was attacking me with shears to shave my
Nice.
head after I doubted the Saints in 2017, saying they wouldn't win 10 games. Of course, that was part of the good old, and Jim was a big part of old Duncan Holder,
No doubt.
where I lost the bet and the Saints went on to win 11 games and I had to shave my head. And that was quite the day.
You should have made that bet this year. You would have had no chance of losing going into this final week of the season.
Well, the problem is I thought the ceiling was 10. So
Okay.
I would have maybe gone against what I thought, but still we're basically where we are, whether, the Saints were one below the ceiling or two below, or they're basically the record is meandering where I thought it was. It was just maybe a little bit different at that than what we thought. But yeah, still, this is where you thought the Saints would be. And here we are. I mean, the fact that it's a 3-team race going into week 18 to win this division is pretty remarkable.
Kind of sad, too, but that's where we are. Look,
Remarkable in a sad way. Yes, I agree.
Jim Derry here with Larry Holder, as we've done just about every Friday throughout the football season. Why would we do it any different here the last Friday of the regular season? We're going to talk about Saints playoff chances. We're also going to talk about week 18 in the NFL because there are obviously other big games besides the Saints this week. We're going to talk a little bit about Bucs-Panthers. We're going to talk maybe a little bit about Colts and Texans on Saturday. And, of course, we're going to talk Bills and Miami. And I'll ask Larry what he thinks about the 4 division races and who he thinks is going to win them all before we are done here. And the last thing we'll do before we go off the air is make our prediction for Saints-Falcons and whether the Saints make the playoffs or not. We invite you to send in your comments, questions. All you got to do is type them in there. Watch it on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter/X. Whatever you want to call it. My mama called it Twitter. I'm still going to call it Twitter. That's where we are right now as we get started here. We're only going to be on the air for about 35 minutes, so let's not waste any more time. Larry, talking about the Saints and Falcons this week, as kind of sad as it is, 8-8. I think anyone would have said that if you said the Saints were going to be 8-8 going into the final week of the season, it would have been kind of a letdown, maybe more of a letdown than we even thought. But the fact that they still have a chance to win the division, make the playoffs, everything's in front of them. Does it change anything if they make the playoffs?
Well, they play one more week, so there you go. But other than that, look, I think the outcome. I think more people thought that the Saints would be in line to winning 10 games and maybe have an 11-6 season, maybe rather than the best be 9-8 and the worst now being 8-9. So I think there's certainly a 3-game swing of your expectation level. And I still think that the Saints were, overall, they were an underachiever. I mean, I don't think anyone else can, you can say anything else. And when you look at, you could say, a lot of people I'm sure have been saying, well, the Saints played their best game last week. Well, it still wasn't the greatest game, but the fact that they came up and played like the Saints have to do to win, opportunistic on defense, put enough points on the board. And that was really the recipe we all thought that the Saints would have to do to win games. And we all thought they'd maybe do that more regularly than what they've done this year. So I think that regardless of what happens tomorrow, look, they can win, go 9-8, miss the playoffs. And it's 2 better for Dennis Allen than he's ever done record-wise, but I'm sure many people are not taking solace in that if the Saints miss the postseason because people figured they'd be a little bit better than this.
Well, that leads into my next question. I mean, does anyone feel any differently about Dennis Allen if they go 9? I mean, look, he's not going anywhere. I mean, we know that. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be the coach of this team next year, barring something very strange. But does it change anyone? I mean, going 9-8 is a lot different than going 8-9. I mean, I know in the grand scheme of things, there might be who-dats that don't think that, but for the guy to be able to have a potential winning season after all they've ever said is he's never won anything, he's never done anything. I mean, still wouldn't have gone to the playoffs, but to have a winning season, is that a step in the right direction? Can he turn things around with his career?
I don't think it's a step in the right direction because what happens after this year? Like, I think you're going to have to see some changes within this roster. And this was the year where you had the worst schedule in terms of opponents' records. So the easiest schedule, and you squandered it. And so
Right.
I can't still sit here and think, oh my gosh, let's put a positive spin on it. So to me, it's maybe that changes if the Saints get into the playoffs, if they get the wild card somehow, if they win the division somehow, maybe you spin that into a positive because look, you get in and who knows what happens? What if you play the Eagles and
Or beat up.
The Eagles keep struggling, and so look, I think it's different if you go 9-8 and get
Right.
in rather than 9-8 and stay out.
And I got to say, I mean, people keep saying that the Saints are going to get their ass kicked if they go to the play. I disagree. I think if they could find a way to get in, again, they're playing. If they would have played Dallas, if they would have had to play Dallas, now they still may have to play Dallas because who knows, some weird things could happen in Week 18. But I think there's about a 90% chance that Dallas is going to be the NFC East champion. I think most of us think that. So if the Saints were to win and it's Philadelphia that has to come here, I mean, Philly's only a 5-point favorite in New York against a bad Giants team. You have to think coming to New Orleans, they'd probably only be about a 2.5 or a 3-point favorite coming here to New Orleans. So Vegas wouldn't think it would be that much of a mismatch if they can find a way to make it happen. Who knows? I mean, I don't think it'd be that far-fetched to think the Saints could win that first game.
Look, Philly's defense has been a sieve. Like, it's been bad lately, like bad. And that's the major issue. Like, the Saints offensively, you could actually expect them to put up points against them. And so that's the difference here. And if the Saints defensively, they can keep playing the way they are, I'm with you. I would say that if they got the 4th seed, that they would be one and done. I wouldn't be willing to guarantee that. Like, they definitely have a better shot than I would have thought a couple weeks ago.
You wouldn't shave your head over it.
Right. I'm gonna keep the old look, my hair's still good. It grew back nice and well. I think that's something that no need to bet my hair over this time. But no, I do think though that the Saints, if they get in, they're not a shoo-in to be one and done. So, but that's the thing. You put yourself in a position where you got to have Carolina, who their owner's throwing drinks at people, and they're losing against a backup quarterback with Jacksonville last week. They're in the tank.
Hey, at least he shows he cares, man.
Then might as well just throw like a bunch of buffalo wings at people then too. Just
unload
the suite. Anything that's left, just unload it on people in Jacksonville. I don't know, like their delicacy there, like it would be here. Like, hey, unload a bunch of crawfish shells on Saints.
Throw gumbo on this dude.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But then you're looking at it like Arizona. Is it possible they beat Seattle? Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. After they beat the Eagles, like they haven't quit in Arizona, and then the Bears. I know the Bears haven't beat the Packers since what, like Jay Cutler, something like that.
Yeah.
But the Bears are playing much better, but Green Bay is kind of on a hot streak. So those aren't all out of the realm of possibility. I feel like it's a more viable thing for the Saints to get a wild card spot than to win the division because of the opponent against the Bucs.
I'm going to give you the percentages in just a minute, but I got a couple comments here. Barry says, sad that the Saints are 8-8, but more surprised by the Bucs and Falcons winning 8-7 games so far this season. Go Saints. I'm not sure whether he means that's a good thing, like he's surprised that they only won 8 or that they actually won that many. I'm not surprised that the Falcons have won 7. I actually thought they'd win about 8, maybe 9 games. The Bucs winning 8 games is a very big surprise to me. I thought they would be terrible. So I got to hand it to Baker Mayfield because a lot is on his shoulders. What he can do with his bum ribs thanks to Tyrann Mathieu. We'll find out next week. Mike says, Dennis Allen reminds me of the bad dad that doesn't give any discipline, so mom has to step in. Who's mom in this one? I don't. Is there anyone giving discipline on this team? That's a good one, Mike. I don't know.
Mom might be outside the building, frankly.
I have no idea because I don't know who's giving discipline this team. All right, going back to the percentages. All right, you're not the first person to say this. Doug Mouton told me yesterday, I think it was Doug that said this, that he thought maybe the wild card is the easier route. I completely disagree. But it wouldn't be the first time that we disagreed by something. All right.
We disagree like weekly. Like, what is it? That's not a shock.
At least something. We got to have something to disagree about. All right. According to Caesars Sportsbook, which is where I base a lot of odds off of because Vegas doesn't lose. You can go by the New York Times. The Athletic says that the Saints have a 23.7% chance to make the playoffs. Okay. You go by Caesars Sportsbook. They say if you did a parlay on the Saints and the Panthers money line, just the money line, which is all that has to happen for the Saints to win, you'd get plus 364, which means you'd have to bet $10. You'd win 36.40 if that actually happened, which implied odds on that. I did not figure this out on my own. I went through a gambling calculator. The implied odds on that to happen is 21.6%. So by Vegas standards, the Saints have a 21.6% chance to win the division. To win the wild card, which would be a money line bet on the Saints, the Cardinals, and the Bears, that would pay out $72 off of a $10 bet, which implied odds would give you 12.2%. So Vegas thinks it's almost double the chances that they win the NFC South and not the wild card. Overall, when you add it all together, I was a little bit off. If you watched Doug Mouton's special last night, and he had me on, I thank Doug for doing that. I was a little bit off. I had to go back and redo the percentages. It's about a 25.9% chance that the Saints get in one way or the other. It sounds about right to me.
Yeah, I mean that's well, here's the thing. Like, it's funny because, of course, the Athletic is the sports section of the New York Times, and yet we have,
which is way different than the New York Times, by the way.
Right, and that's what I was going to bring up. Like we have at the Athletic, the Saints having a 23.7% chance of getting in to the playoffs. The New York Times has it right now at 34%. So,
which is up from 31% Sunday night. So I don't understand how that changed over the course of the past few days.
Yeah, well, I guess the New York Times simulator does it on 80,000 simulations, and so maybe what they're doing, I'm just speaking for.
The Iowa caucus changed that or something?
Well, maybe injuries, sitting people, like maybe the simulations of games outside of the Saints have fluctuated. So that's probably where that comes from. Probably giving the Saints a little bit better of a chance because of that. And so, but yeah, here's the thing. I mean, you could be right in that. Well, the Saints only need one domino to fall outside of them. So that obviously that makes it a little bit easier. I mean, that's inherent. But I just feel like the results, like I would expect Tampa to beat Carolina. I mean, I expect Green Bay to beat the Bears, and I'm giving picks away. And I'm expecting, Seattle to beat Arizona. But I think it's more viable that Arizona can beat Seattle and that Chicago can beat Green Bay over Carolina beating Tampa. So that's where I'm coming from.
No, I hear you. Either way, it's hard. I mean, but what I'll say this, you weren't on last week. You had some family issues to deal with. We had Hold the Mayo on last week. It was an interesting show. But going into last week, the Saints, by the New York Times predictor, was at 12%. I'm not exactly sure where the Athletic was. But so the fact that it's jumped 3 times where it was last week almost just goes to show you, they can do it. It wouldn't be that giant leap of faith. Before last week, I would have said no chance. But at least, I mean, it's realistic, and Nicholas says he thinks Carolina beats Tampa this week. We'll get to my predictions in a little bit. But, it's at least not out of the realm of realistic possibility. Whereas last week I would have said, I think you might be making a big wish to Santa and his elves.
At least we are this week talking about the Saints possibly making the playoffs. If the Saints lost to Tampa, our conversation would be 180-degree difference. We'd be
Oh,
talking about
100%.
next year,
Who's getting fired?
who's in, who's out. Right. So at least we're still talking about that. I don't know how much Saints fan would rather talk about what we're talking about now compared to what we would have been talking about if the Saints would have
There's
lost.
still a lot that would rather talk about they've kind of crawled into a hole. That you could still find them on Twitter, but they're not nearly as easy to find now as they were, let's say 5-6 days ago. But they've pretty much crawled in a hole and just been silent. They'll be back out if the Saints lose this game, or maybe even if the Saints don't make the playoffs. But I mean, look, how much grief and I get it's a disappointment, and it's a once in a lifetime really kind of easy schedule. But still, if you have a winning record, I don't know how much you could just completely bash. Yeah, you could say this needs to be changed. They need to do this differently. And I've said what I think what's going to happen next year. I think it's going to be awful. But still, you go 9-8. I mean, it's Sean Payton went 9-8 his last season here. Nobody was complaining about that.
Well, they were also unsettled at quarterback. I mean, at one point they had to play Ian Book at quarterback. I mean, geez.
I get that. And Trevor Siemian for 4 games, who's awful.
Right, exactly. So I think, though, when you look back at the Saints' schedule and you look at some of the losses that they had and you think, man, which ones could have changed? Which ones should have been different?
Green
Bay for sure, given now you look at how well they're playing. Like, I would say the Packers are a better team now than the Saints are. But at that point, the Saints were a better team then. That game got away. That one's ones that you're going to be kicking yourself. And then I would say if you look at how the rest of the schedule has panned out with how the teams have done, let's see.
If Taysom doesn't fumble, they beat Atlanta.
That the Falcons game was the one I was going to point to because you look at it now. The Rams are playing well. The Lions are good. The Vikings. I mean, that one
my thing about Green Bay, Larry. I hate to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but the thing that really ticks me off by Green Bay is if you don't let that fourth quarter lead slip away, you're 3-0. Okay, to me that changes the outlook on everything. I don't even think you can't go game by game after that. I think they played differently against Tampa Bay in week 4. I think the whole season is different. It has a whole different feel if you win that game and go 3-0. To me, I don't want to be Captain Obvious here, but there's a major difference between 2-0 and 3-0, and especially 2-0, 3-0 and 2-1. I'm talking about, to me, there's just something in the mindset that if you start out 3-0, I don't know what the percentage is. I think it's like 80-something% you're going to make the playoffs if you get to 3-0. So there's just something about the mindset. And to me, to let that game squander away, you allowed a team like Green Bay, which wasn't doing anything at the time, and Jordan Love, who basically was making his first home start ever, to come in and have this fourth quarter comeback when he hadn't done anything for 3 quarters. That just demoralized this team, and it carried over into the next week, and I think changed the course of the season.
And look, after that game, it's not like Jordan Love played super well until about midseason, and now he's playing like the guy Green Bay hoped, and it almost seems like the future's pretty bright for Jordan Love. But you also got to remember, in that game, Derek Carr gets hurt, and then he plays hurt the next week, and so then you 100%. Go to 2-2. You play a hapless Patriots team. Anybody with a pulse, should beat them, and the Saints beat up on them. But then you probably have still a bit of a physically fragile Derek Carr, maybe, and then they don't beat the Texans, and then they don't beat the Jaguars, and now you're in a hole, and you're having to play catch up. And you could argue the Colts win was one of, if not the best win of the season, because they're fighting for playoffs and such. The 2 best wins of the season, caliber wise, was the Colts and the Bucs. But like you said, like the Packers game, Falcons game, I think those are the 2 you look back on and say, man, you kind of let those slip away, because the Vikings, it's like the Saints didn't even show up. That was one of that, like, just flub games where it's just like, man, what the heck happened? I feel like the Saints have one of those every year, but yeah, I would look more back at Packers and Falcons. That, man, those are games that you could have had.
Those are season changers.
Agreed.
especially Green Bay, is a season changer. And so when you look forward to this game, again, I don't want to give our predictions away because we're going to end the show again, excuse me, with our predictions of this game and whether we think the Saints will make the playoffs or not. But when you look at this matchup, it's a little bit different than last week. I went into last week, and I know you and I weren't together, but I thought last week was a great matchup for the Saints. Like I said, against the Rams, I didn't think it was a good matchup. Last week was clearly a good matchup because you look at these numbers, and the Saints and Falcons are very evenly matched teams. They both have, let's say, less than spectacular coaches who have made some questionable decisions throughout the year. That's the politically correct way to put it. But again, you look at these numbers, 16 and 13, add up to 29, 18 and 11, add up to 29. So by rankings alone, these are the same teams. And I think it's going to be a super close kind of game because of that.
Yeah, and you just look back at the game they played last time. I mean, the Saints need to get to the end zone. Like they scored 5 field goals.
Right.
That's not going to win this game, even
though
they
threw a pick 6 in one of them.
Right. Right. Yeah.
When they went 0 for 5 in the red zone. One of them was a pick 6. They actually gave the Falcons a touchdown.
Right. Jesse Bates with the touchdown. That's right. And so, look, you can't be hapless in the red zone. I mean, that's just that. And like you said, that was the swing. I mean, the pick 6, you total swing. If the Saints score a touchdown there, guess what? They win the game.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree.
It
just goes to show how one play, one moment, not only could change an entire game, but can change a whole season. So, I mean, now you're not changing the season, really. You win. You got to win either way. You still need help no matter what. But I think the Saints come – again, I'm not giving my pick away, but I think both of these teams are going to come out in a good mindset. I mean, the Falcons have squandered opportunities. I think 2 of the 3 past weeks they lost at Carolina. That's going to be a killer to them. But I think both of these teams are going to come out. I think you're going to get the best effort from both of them.
Well, they both have something to play for, insanely. Look, the Falcons win. Tampa loses. The Falcons
That's
are
right.
the NFC South champion.
100%.
So they are certainly playing for that opportunity. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And here's the thing. It's like you don't want Taylor Heineke to have one of these good Taylor Heineke moments, which we've seen him have in the past. And so like that, you got to worry about that. And of course, stopping the run. You don't want Bijan Robinson or Tyler Algier to run on you. And we've seen running backs run on them at times this year. So, it comes down to that. Create some takeaways, which Heineke is prone to doing, giving the ball away.
Him.
Yeah, and no doubt. And, you got to see the Saints, their pressure package last week was pretty top notch. So yeah. I think that's something that the Saints need to lean on going into this game.
Patrick says he heard DeRitter is the quarterback. I have not heard that. Now, Taylor Heineke is dealing with an injury, so it wouldn't surprise me if Desmond Ritter, is the quarterback. DeRitter is a city in southwest Louisiana.
Close enough.
But, yeah, I mean, they're both probably equally as good as quarterback. But regardless, the Saints have to get pressure. And like last week when I was talking about how the Bucs were terrible against the pass, 32nd against the pass for Tampa Bay. It was going to be a Derek Carr kind of game, and he stepped up, and he played very well. I think it doesn't look like Alvin Kamara is going to play at this point, which means you got to get Jamal Williams and Taysom Hill to be super involved running the football.
Yeah, and that's going to happen. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Just a heads up, Taylor Heineke has an ankle. I know he was limited in practice Wednesday.
I think it's going to be Taylor Heineke.
I think it's going to be Taylor Heineke, too.
I mean, I think they think that's probably their only chance to win. So, in Claude, in answer to your question, I don't think we know the answer to Kamara, whether Kamara playing, but I would say it's looking more and more like he's not. He has not participated in practice for 2 days, and I don't think the Saints want to talk about high ankle sprains because we know what that's done to this team in the past with different players, Michael Thomas. But, Alvin Kamara is a different kind of player, but I got to say at this point, I think I'd be surprised if he plays.
Yeah, I would be too. I know Alvin's going to want to play, but you can't have him out there hampered. The Saints' offense can be anemic at times, and you can't have someone, even though he's arguably your best weapon, but still, you can't have him out there.
Arguably.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So Jamal Williams, This needs to be a type of game for him. Obviously, Taysom Hill, need to have him involved. And so, yeah, it's one of those games where you wished it didn't come down to having to play Atlanta for your playoff life, but that's where we are.
Oh boy. Every in the ghost of Buddy D kind of comes into my body every now and then. And I feel the need to answer the squirrels for some reason. Here you go, squirrel. Are y'all idiots running this page? Y'all have the voice. We have the voice. Ask Gail Benson why she doesn't care about this team. Are you serious, dude? I mean, really? You think Gail Benson doesn't care about this team? Why is Loomis, it would be why are Loomis, Allen, and Carmichael still here? Well, they have a chance to have a winning record. This is my point, okay? I don't like what's going on this year either. Have they underachieved? I think Larry and I both agree, we've said it already, that they have underachieved. But you don't just fire a coach and a general manager because you've underachieved. To me, if they go 9-8, first of all, he's not getting fired, so we're really kind of wasting time because Larry can only be on for another, 10 minutes or so. So, but the fact that you want to just fire everybody, they might go 9-8, even if they make the playoffs. Fire everybody. I mean, that just makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I will be curious to see. There will be changes. I'm curious to see where the changes will happen. Like, to me, of the three that he mentioned, I mean, Carmichael would be the most likely. I'm like, I really, you keep saying about Dennis Allen, like he's safe. I'm leaving that option on the table.
Oh no, man. Come on. You covered this team for over a decade.
I know.
You know how it works. Come on.
But I'm
man.
leaving that option on the table.
The only option that this is at this point, I think the only chance now, Pete Carmichael, I think he resigns on his own. That's just my opinion. I don't think he wants to be bashed anymore. I wouldn't want to be bashed like this if I were him. And the Saints just don't fire people. I think he's going to step down on his own. That's my opinion. But Dennis Allen, barring resigning, which I can't see because he knows he's never going to get another head coaching job in his life, I can't fathom that they would fire Dennis Allen, especially if I think that's crazy. Barry says the squirrel never lived through the Meekum ownership years. I did. I mean, we had a new coach every other year. They fired Hank Strand, for God's sake. It was the opposite of this thing last year. I mean, during the Meekum last year, last lifetime, I guess I should say. All right, look, I swear we're going to get back to the Saints real quickly because I want to talk about the other games, especially I want to talk about the Panthers and the Bucs and get your thought on that game. This line has not moved since it went from 5.5 to 4.5 quickly. The Sharps jumped on Carolina early. It's kind of steadied. It stayed where it is. I think the Sharps are pretty good about where this line is right now. Bucs are 4.5-point favorite. I don't know that we know how injured Baker Mayfield really is. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu gave him a shot in the ribs. If anyone doesn't think that was on purpose, thinking about the future, at that point, the Saints were going to win the game. You might as well give them a little love tap. And I think there's no question that's what that was. If that affects him going into this game and they have to go to Kyle Trask for some reason, or Baker Mayfield has to play with injured ribs, I think that really could affect that game.
Well, there's certainly a difference between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But yeah, I think that just scanning what's going on as we're talking, that Baker Mayfield is on the practice field. So, he's doing his thing. So I think he's going to be look, that guy's playing. I mean, he plays hurt. Like, that's one thing you can't question about him. So yeah, I just think that you got guys that are hungry on one side and you got guys who are ready to go to Cancun on the other side. So, I think that's that plays into this. And they're at Carolina. There's going to be like 6 people at the game. I mean, it's going to be like playing in like a COVID stadium when there only had like 3,000 people there. So look, I picked Tampa. To me, it's an easy pick. Carolina gave up last week. They're not going to all of a sudden just say, let's win one for the old win one for the Tepper. No, they're not going to do that.
They're a completely different team at home, though. And I think this line is jumped down for a reason. I think when you look at the splits on, and this is from a betting perspective, not from anything else. I mean, when you look at the splits, Bryce Young is a much better quarterback at home. Not that he's great at home either. I agree that I don't think they're going to necessarily fight for the Tepper. That's not going to happen. That's kind of funny, actually.
Someone might get into a fight with Tepper.
I mean, the temperature is Tepper and tepid, whatever you want to call it.
Tepperid.
Exactly, tepperid. I like that. But I think it's going to be a fight. I'll give you my final prediction in a minute, but I think that's going to be close. I definitely would say I like the Panthers plus 4.5. Whether they win or not is another story. Real quickly, other two games before we get back to the Saints and end the show with Saints. Texans, Colts, I find super interesting. This line has pretty much steadied out. The public is all over Houston. I don't think there's a single Aunt Mabel or Drunk Joe who thinks the Texans won't win this game. But the Sharps have kind of quietly behind the scenes hit the Colts a little bit. Colts are at home. They were favored in Houston in week 2. I don't see what's that big of a difference between the two teams now. I'm not sure why the Texans are now favored in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I've picked the Texans, but I don't love the pick. I think that, the Colts being at home in this one, I think will matter. And they're both kind of playing on the same plane, fighting for a playoff spot. The winner is still alive.
Yep.
Depending on what happens on the next day, which I find that fascinating. So it gives you a reason to tune in Saturday night, which is why the NFL put that game there.
Yeah, of course.
So it's and
they also both have a chance to make the wild card as well, right?
Right. So the winner survives, and I think that's you got to see what's going to happen playing around with them. But I picked the Texans, but like I said, I don't love that pick. I'm just going with it. Here's me, I'm quarterback guy. Who do I trust more, Gardner Minshew or C.J. Stroud? I trust C.J. Stroud.
I hear you, and it's a really tough one to pick, but I put this one in my best bets, and it's not based off of any game analysis. It's based off of the fact that Vegas don't lose, and 96, and I'm not exaggerating, 96% of the bets going into yesterday were on Houston.
Oh,
and so this money line has actually dropped. It was Colts plus 110 yesterday, and now it's even money. So that showed you some big money is coming on the Colts overnight. They thinking the way that I'm thinking. Vegas is going to lose a ton of money if Houston wins this game. They don't usually win a ton of money. Lose a ton of money. So I'm taking the Colts, again, strictly me versus Aunt Mabel and Drunk Joe pick there. Finally, before we get back to the Saints, Sunday Night Football, the final game of the regular season in 2023, or at least the 2023 season. What a big game. The AFC East Championship, the Bills were left for dead a few weeks ago. This line has come down. It has definitely moved. Big money has come in on the Dolphins over the course of the last 24 hours. It has gone from Bills -3 to Bills -2.5 at -120. And let me just tell you, if you don't know a lot about the gambling world, to move a number off of 3 either way, to move a number off of 3 is a big deal. It means somebody, or at least a group of people with money, have put money on the Dolphins. The money line's changed also from plus 140 to plus 130. But yet most of the tickets are on the Bills, which means, again, another game where the public is all over the Bills, but the money is kind of on Miami here.
I have picked Buffalo, but I can see where there could be some hesitation with Josh Allen. I think that's probably why. I know he's banged up and he has not played super great lately. So I think that is part of it. And I know the Dolphins are really beat up. Like, that's, to me, when I picked Buffalo, I'm thinking, how are they going to rush the passer? Because they just lost Chubb. They don't have Jalen Phillips. And so it's something that their edge rushers, where do they get that? And I think that's a big deal. And so, and also, Xavier Howard's banged up. Jalen Waddle's banged up. Raheem Mostert's banged up. Like, even I say all that, and yet, look, the Dolphins secondary is still pretty good. The Dolphins still have weapons. Tyreek Hill, a Shane. So you look at it in that sense. I could see it, to me, the Josh Allen factor of being healthy or being erratic. I could see where money could be coming in back onto the Dolphins. So I get that, but I picked Buffalo.
This is my best bet of the week. And everyone's talking about, you just mentioned it, Josh Allen, but everyone wants to talk about the Dolphins injuries, and they don't want to talk about how banged up the Bills are as well. They have their own issues. And I just think the Dolphins are a different team at home. And they've only lost 3 games under Mike McDaniel at home in his tenure here. They're 13-3 at home under Mike McDaniel. They play much differently at home, and I just think that if you go back and you look at that playoff game they played in Buffalo last year in the snow, they really should have won that game, honestly. And I think that kind of creeps in. I think it's sort of I think you're going to see the Dolphins' best effort after last week putting up that stinker. I really, really liked it. I loved them way more at getting 3 than I love them getting a 2.5. That half a point makes a big difference. I'd probably at 2.5, I'd actually rather play the money line at plus 130, where a $10 bet gets you 13 or a $100 bet gets you 130, depending on how you look at it. So I'm going to take the Dolphins. Surprise. We're different on 2 of these. And now I'll give you my prediction. We'll give you our predictions on what we think is going to happen with the Saints this week as we go back and wrap up the show. We got about 2-3 more minutes real quick. What you got this weekend?
I am taking the Saints, and I feel pretty good about it. Like I feel like the Saints, that they're going to kind of ride some of that momentum. I feel good about this one. I think Jamal Williams, if he's got a feeling, I think he could be viable. I feel like that. I don't know. I sense that Derek Carr is playing better. His numbers the last few weeks, in the last 4 weeks, he's one of the top passer rated guys in the NFL. But one of those passer ratings is a fluke because it came in the Rams when they scored touchdowns at the end and whatever. That was a fluke. But the other games he played well. So I feel like that he can, if he plays the way he played last week in week 15, and the Saints defensively, they fluster Atlanta. Look, I like the Saints. I'm going to go Saints 20, the Falcons 17.
I agree with you. I think that that means that you think that the Saints will be right on the line and it's a push. So I never predict pushes. You just can't win. I mean, nobody wins if it's
I'm not. Hey.
That's not your world. I get it. It is mine. I'm going to say this. Look, I'm not even going to predict. I wouldn't predict a push anyway. I think the Saints going to have an inspired effort. I think they're better than the Falcons. I think that they will be able to run the ball even if Kamara doesn't play. I liked what I saw out of Jamal Williams. And look, I haven't heard a lot of Derek Carr bash in the last month. I really have. It's amazing. And all the bashing now is on Dennis Allen. The Derek Carr haters have kind of crawled in their little squirrel holes the last month or so, and it's kind of interesting. I find it interesting because since that first quarter of that Lions game, he's been a different guy. He's played actually very well. I think the Saints win this one fairly easily. I'm going to say 23-13. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game as well. And my prediction on Bucs and Panthers, because they're not going to win the wild card. Seattle and Green Bay aren't losing. At least one of the two are going to win. I think both win. But I don't think it's coming to the wild card. So they need the Panthers to win. And what I think is going to happen, I think the Panthers are going to be winning throughout most of the game. I've seen this movie before. 52-yard field goal for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think his name is it McLaughlin or Laughlin? I can't remember. Whatever.
Chase McLaughlin.
Chase McLaughlin is going to hit a 52-yard field goal. As time expires, the Bucs win by 1 and break the hearts of Houdats. Although, technically, they will still have a chance. If the Saints win, no matter what happens, they have a chance going into the late window. They just need to become Cardinals and Bears fans. We'll see.
Well, I'm closing the window. I picked Tampa, I picked Seattle, and I picked Green Bay.
Now, I'm with you. I picked all 3 of those as well. In fact, Seattle's one of my best bets of the week. I think they're going to really rebound. I think they're going to have a really good week. And everybody's talking about how good Arizona's been. Yeah, I don't know. Edgar, the future does not look good. That's another show. Maybe that's next week. We'll talk about it later.
Which future?
I agree with you, unfortunately.
Me and Jim, we're not going to get fired, I don't think, right?
Well, I hope not. I hope I'm still doing this next year. I hope you're still sitting here with me. Larry, thank you for joining. You're going to be back. You're going to come back next Friday, and
yeah, we could do postseason for sure.
All right, we're going to do postseason together, and so we'll be back. Whether we're going to be talking about the Saints, but we're also going to be talking about the playoffs, whether the Saints are in it or not. We hope you come back next Friday, and as always, go catch my podcast wherever you get your podcast. Search for Dattitude. I will add my monologue, and you can listen to all this all over again and hear what my song of the day is. Happy New Year to everybody. We will talk to you on Monday on Dattitude, live here next Friday. Have a great weekend, everyone.